Former President Trump thinks it's his election to lose as voters head to the polls today to elect a new president. If he's right, he'll make history, becoming the first former president to lose office and then win it again since 1892.
Wow.
Grover Cleveland, the last guy to do it.
That's what I was going to say, Grover Cleveland.
Yeah, and Grover Cleveland, not just the last guy to do that, but he's also the last president to have the name Grover.
Yeah.
So Trump will be in really good company if he can pull it off. Now, the former president's campaign team is confident because they believe the core argument that the Biden-Harris administration ruined the economy and messed up the border, and that Trump can come in and fix it. And he believes that's a message that will resonate with voters. Trump campaign officials, though, dismissing questions about his off-message rallies, some recent negative-style campaigning that's taken a dark tone in the last couple of weeks. Trump officials are also pointing to very strong early voting turnout, including Republicans, who lead early voting in several states, including Florida.
Yeah, I would be cautious if either campaign is too optimistic, because this could go either way. And that's what you would expect to hear from the Trump campaign. The Harris campaign basically saying the same thing. They see a way to victory, and they're happy with something that they see in this state and something else they see in that state.
Well, Trump's brand is strength, right?
Yeah.
So he always shows that it's a positive, that he's always winning. And so that's, to be expected from his campaign. And look, he may be right. He's been closing in a lot of the polls, and, most of them are neck and neck and within the margin of error.
Yeah, and I think his campaign already had a really good sign so far today. Dixville Notch, the first in the nation to vote, as always. Tie between Harris and Trump. And you might say, well, a tie, why is that great for Trump? Well, in 2020, Joe Biden took all 5 votes. And so that's a big shift to the right there in Dixville Notch.
I think it was 3-3.
Yeah, it was 3-3. So that's a significant shift. And of course, we could really read into that and apply it to everything else that's going to happen today.
I mean, it sounds like it. It's going to be a tie.
It's going to be a close race. Yeah. In fact, I would say taking Dixville Notch and those results, we're probably headed towards 269, 269.
Yeah, and New Hampshire is so much like all the other states in the country.
Right. So Hillary Clinton won with 4 votes as opposed to Trump with 2 votes back in 2016. So you could see Trump, he had a rough 2020, but really made up a lot of ground here in 2024. And for the first time, he didn't win, but he at least tied. So again,
big news.
Yeah, read into that what you will, but I think we can learn a lot from Dixville Notch.
So on the flip side, Vice President Harris and her supporters believe they have the edge as the final day of voting takes place today, after several weeks where it seemed like their campaign was on shaky ground and President Trump had been gaining momentum. The Harris camp pointing to late deciding voters who have been breaking towards them in the days ahead of the election. And then this surprise Iowa poll that showed Harris ahead of Trump in a reliably red state. They also have poll data suggesting that the gender gap among women voters may be higher than previously thought. There was a survey in Michigan that showed women 65 and older are supporting Trump 2-1, or supporting Harris 2-1 over Trump, which is a surprising number compared to previous elections.
I think the Harris campaign has tightened things up in the past couple of days. I think they've gained a little bit of steam here. I also think the Harris campaign has the better ground operation in the key swing states. The amount of doors they've knocked on and the get out the vote effort that they have is I think a significant advantage in some of those states. But you also look at 2016, you look at 2020, there was an undercount of the Trump vote in those key swing states, especially the Rust Belt. And with things as tight as they are now, I mean, this is the best Trump has performed heading into Election Day. If that's the case, again, I don't know if it will be, but if it is, then you could easily see Trump winning here. We've also seen since 2022, after Roe v. Wade was overturned, Democrats have performed well in elections, and women have really turned out in big numbers. Could that be the case this time around? Is there a significant shift in the black vote? Is Trump able to peel off, especially younger black men? I'm not so sure about that. I think those numbers are going to wind up being close to what they typically are. There's just a lot of questions. A
lot of questions.
Yeah, I don't have any of the answers.
The Joe Rogan endorsement at the last minute, could that be a factor? I mean, that's a big endorsement.
Right. Could that propel, some young men in some of these key swing states to show up, whereas maybe they were kind of iffy whether they'd bother today if they haven't voted up to this point. So
it's an interesting divide because in the young voters that listen to that show, there's clearly a huge disparity between Trump and Harris male voters who are 25 and under. The problem is they're like the least likely to vote of any group. So the question is, does Trump change that and actually get them to turn out? Barack Obama was able to do it when he ran in 2008, but it's very difficult to motivate those folks. What gets them to come out? Is it Joe Rogan and his endorsement? We'll find out.
Yep.
But I think, when you look at this race, there's just so many unusual factors that make it different than 2016 and 2020. I think Roe versus Wade is probably a big one. Remember when we were looking at 2022 and the Republicans were promising the big red wave, and it turned out to be like a red splash?
Yeah,
red trickle.
They did really well in Florida and underperformed just about everywhere else.
They did win Congress, but barely.
Yeah.
They were supposed to, have, absolute control. The House, absolutely. And so we'll see in this case. But, there are some issues here, I think, for Harris. That you have to be concerned about the lack of enthusiasm among some male voters in some of the demographics that they've been reliably Democratic. And that includes black male voters and Hispanic males. But then will that be countered by this increase in support with the gender gap with female voters? Could that cancel that out and work in her favor? The other thing to look at is, voter turnout. Women are out voting men in this election, but that doesn't mean they're all voting for Harris.
Exactly. And then, like you mentioned, Congress, we've got the Senate up for grabs. I think you're basically looking at 51-48 right now. And then, Ohio could go either way. I would be surprised if Democrats somehow hung on to the majority there. It's not impossible. It would just take if they were to pull that off, then it would be a pretty significant Harris win for the White House. And then in the House, it could go either way, and I think that's one we're not going to know for a while because some of the states that could really decide it are out west, especially in California. I think there's like 5 toss-up states or so.
So interesting that some of the key states are in very blue states.
Yeah, for the House. Yeah, New York, California. So again, that one's going to take a little bit of time, and I think regardless of the outcome of the presidency here, you're going to have a Senate that's probably going to be pretty tight. I mean, look, if Trump and Republicans did really well, they could inch up that majority a bit more, but you're probably going to have a pretty close Senate, and you're probably going to have a pretty close House with whatever party's in charge not having much room for error at all. So it's a divided country.
I would say if Trump wins, he will have both houses of Congress.
I agree.
Which is, much more conducive to governing and getting your agenda passed. If Harris wins, she'll probably have a divided Congress.
Yeah.
She'll probably not have the Senate, but might have a narrow edge in the House.
Yeah.
So, that's probably the likely scenarios depending on who wins the presidency.
And then finally here in Florida, I think Trump's going to win Florida. I think Rick Scott's going to win the Senate race. But amendments 3 and 4, the legalizing of marijuana and the abortion amendment, those could go either way. If this was a state like most states where it was a simple majority, they would both easily pass. Yeah, but getting that 60% threshold, and credit where credit's due, Governor DeSantis and his full court press down the stretch, I think it's made a difference. I don't know if it's enough to get it underneath that threshold, but he's certainly made it really, really close.
Your taxpayer dollars at work.
Making sure the governor gets what he wants.
Yep. All right. Chris Trankman with today's top stories. Chris, thanks so much.
Thank you.